Um, Sarah, in your candidate statement, you referred to politics of compassion. Can you explain that for us?
I'm talking about universal health care for all Californians. I'm talking about education is a right, it's not a privilege. Everyone in California should be able to get higher education, affordable education. Right now, when I came to California in 1974, I used to hear this slogan, affordable education for all. Now is education for whoever can afford it. And we need to become more compassionate in our system. I'm talking about prison system, that 50% of prisoners are victimless, are there for victimless crimes. I'm talking about drug-related issues. So instead of building more prisons, since 1980, we have built 23 prisons as compared to one Cal State university. So these are the issues that we are bringing in this campaign.
Sara Amir, what do you mean by victimless crime?
Means that if somebody has, a pound of marijuana and is arrested, that's there is no harm to anybody else, just that person. So there is no victim involved. That's what I mean.
Would you say there's a victim involved if the person intended to sell the marijuana?
Well, drug use is a health issue. It's not a criminal issue. So I think that we really need to rethink about using of drugs.
Do you think that selling marijuana to high school students or middle school students should be a criminal offense?
I think we should really decriminalize the using of drugs. Instead of that, we should put our money in rehabilitation, in treatment, and in education of people that drug use is a health issue, and we should prevent that.
I want to add something here. We're not necessarily saying that people who sell pot to underage kids, the drinking age in the state is still 21, I think, and I would accept that should be a legal age also. I believe marijuana should be decriminalized, but I don't want kids to get it. But if you're talking about not putting people found guilty of victimless crimes in a penitentiary at $28,000 a year for taxpayers, that doesn't mean that you're going to condone that behavior. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be a penalty. I mean, we had a congressman voting on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives the last 2 years with a homing device around his ankle because he was on probation for, using it for illegal campaign funds. I mean, can you think of anything much more embarrassing than being a congressman and having to report to your probation officer through a homing device? But, he didn't have to go, Representative Jay Kim didn't have to go to jail. He got to go to Congress. So, we're talking about the inequality of the way people are treated in the criminal justice system. And nobody needs to look any further than the O.J. Simpson trial to see that it's not simply about race. It's about wealth. Go to death row where 510 people are currently rotting in the United States. You will find nary a rich man on death row.
Thank you for that answer. Dan, in your statement, you indicate that you believe everyone should have a living wage in the state of California.
I do.
How in today's modern world, where American workers are competing with workers in other countries who are earning $1 a day, do you feel it's possible for corporations to pay employees in the United States and in California a living wage and still compete in the global marketplace?
I think corporations will do what they're required to do. I mean, in France, every corporation pays for health care for their employees. Similarly, in Germany, in Belgium, in Finland, in Italy, these are not unusual things. What this really has to do with is where we put our priorities as a society. If everything is going to be prioritized based on the immediate bottom line, how much profit the wealthy make on their investments, then indeed we're not going to have universal health care, we're not going to have a living wage, we're not going to clean up the environment, we're not going to have high-quality schools. But those are just the things that the people of California really want. And maybe that corporate bottom line could be shaved just a little bit so we could raise the standard for everybody instead of our current free trade regime, which is really lowering. It's finding the lowest common denominator. I mean, look at the shirts we wear. Look at the toys we play with. Where are these things being produced? Prison labor in China, child labor in Indonesia and Malaysia. All this is being done in the name of private profit. Well, profit's not a horrible thing. Capitalism is not the worst system ever devised because there's a lot of systems that are worse than it. But you can't have this kind of barbaric, primitive capitalism that we've moved back to over the last 20 years. There have to be some rules that ensure that workers get a decent level of benefits and pay, that they get sick leave, that they get family leave. I mean, these are things, and also, Europe is looking at 35-hour work weeks. The United States hasn't talked about that for 40 years. I mean, it's not like we have to reinvent the wheel over here. There are many countries around the world that are far more advanced sociologically than the United States.
Thank you.
Okay, my question is for Dan Hamburg. Governor Wilson has continually attacked the California Teachers Association. If elected, how would you work with the CTA?
Well, given the fact that they've endorsed Gray Davis, I'm not going to fall over for everything they want out of me. I'm a former teacher. I think that the job of the teacher is vitally important. I think it's criminal that we pay starting teachers an average of $23,000 a year in the state. We pay starting prison guards about 70% more than that. So obviously the best and the brightest in the state of California are not drawn to the teaching profession. And now that we've gone to this smaller class size on K through 3, and we have to recruit 2 million new teachers in California over the next 10 years, I tell you, we better start paying teachers a reasonable salary if we want our kids to be taught by professionals. But, while I'm sympathetic to teachers, I'm not sympathetic to the educational bureaucracy of the state of California. And I hope Sarah gets to tell you some of the stories that she runs into with the Los Angeles Unified School District, which is this mega corporation. It's a $7.5 billion monster. And it acts just like, the nonprofit or governmental monsters act just as bad as the private corporate monsters. And they begin to do things based on how much money they can make instead of on the welfare of children.
Yeah, they have built 9 schools on contaminated sites. You know why they did that? Because they did environmental studies and they oversaw their own work. They didn't come to any environmental programs with the state that they are supposed to. So they cleaned up the sites according to what they say, cleaned up these sites and then built the schools. And now there is one school, Jefferson Middle School in South Central LA, that is built, $50 million school. It's built on contaminated sites. And these kids that go to this middle school, they're being exposed to toxics. So it's all because they weren't doing a good job and their bureaucracy, and there are, big corporation like. So I think that we should pay more attention to what they're doing.
Thank you.
Joe Grossman and Kathleen Haley here tonight talking with candidate for governor Dan Hamburg and candidate for lieutenant governor Sara Amir at a joint production of Voices from the Village and Club Cruise. Going to be looking for your phone calls in just about 10 minutes at a number that will appear on the screen and ask you to call in, express your point of view, ask the candidates questions. Dan, what is your overall view on taxation? And I'll come back with a follow-up question.
Well, I think California's tax system is in a huge mess. Back in 1978 or 79, I can't remember which year it was that Proposition 13 passed, it totally screwed up the municipal and county financing system in California. And one of the reasons we've got this kind of breakneck suburbanization in California and all this strip malls and the big box retail is because cities and counties are now depending increasingly on sales tax and increasingly less on property tax. California is the 39th state in the country in property tax. In other words, it's only 11 from the bottom. We're 27th overall in taxation. And to hear the California Business Roundtable, this is the hardest state in the country in which to do business. But it certainly isn't because of taxes. We definitely need a split roll. There should be a different rate of taxation for residential as opposed to commercial property, because obviously residential property turns over much more quickly. And so what's happening with Prop 13 is that increasingly residential, owners of residences are paying a greater part of the property tax bill of California, and corporations, where the land turns over much more infrequently, are paying proportionally less. In general, I think the wealthy pay too little. I think corporations pay too little. I think the middle class pays too much, particularly in Social Security taxes. Reagan talked a lot about lowering taxes, but now if you're a self-employed person, you pay 15% FICA. That's one of the main reasons that people don't like hiring more people to come to work in their small businesses because they simply can't afford the tax overhead. So, you know, as governor of California, one thing I would do would be to lobby to change the FICA tax and make people continue to pay that tax even after the $66,000 limit that currently exists. Because why shouldn't everybody pay the same Social Security taxes? I mean, I just think that, you know, you look at the head of an HMO or some really wealthy person, they pay all of their Social Security taxes the first week of the year. When, you know, a lot of these guys make, you know, $1 million a month. They can pay their whole Social Security tax in a couple of days of work. The rest of us keep paying 15%, every paycheck, 15%. So no, I think the tax laws are grossly unfair in California. I think they're grossly unfair on the federal level. And, you know, as governor, I would propose some major changes in the state tax system.
Taking the net income in the state of California that's derived from personal property tax, residential property tax, do you believe that this revenue could be raised by shifting that to income tax on the state level?
Well, I think that when Californians were fooled into voting against raising the top marginal tax rates in the state lost a lot of potential revenue. I mean, right now in California, I can't remember exactly where the top marginal rate is, but it's about 15%. And when it went on that was supposed to be for only a 2-year period, and then taxes were supposed to go up to a more graduated tax at the higher end levels. I mean, look at what's happened. In this country, in 1950, if you earned anything you earned over $400,000 was taxed at 90%. Then in 1960, we took it down to 50%. And now it's 28%. I mean, we used to tax wealthy people. I mean, Bill Gates, what does he need with $40 billion? I mean, really.
Federal lawsuits are very expensive.
Well, you know, this whole thing of you know, now we've got a thing in American business where it's like 250 to 1, the pay scale of CEOs to line workers. You know, just 20 years ago, it was 30 to 1 or 40 to 1. That's what it is now in Japan and Germany. You know, we have this tremendously overfed class of CEOs and top managers in this country. And, you know, it seems like they get big raises whether the company does well or poorly. You know, they just keep forking over the money to them. So, you know, that's got to stop, because not only is it bad for the economy and bad for the revenues of government, but it destroys morale within businesses to see these vast disparities. And I don't think a democracy can survive in an atmosphere where the wealth disparity is as just huge as it's become in this state and in this country.
Thank you. We have a phone call. Caller?
Yes?
You're on the air here at a joint production of Voices from the Village and Club Cruise. Do you have a question or statement for our guests?
Yes, I do. You had just mentioned about changing the income tax law, which, I mean, making it more progressive than regressive. I'd like to know your stand on reinstituting the corporate taxes on profits as opposed to personal taxes. I understand that it used to be that the corporations paid 80% of the tax. Now it's people who pay 80% of the tax. Is there any way to get corporations to pay taxes on the profits again?
Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Dan, that seemed to be directed to
Sure,
your
it's
answer.
possible. All you have to do is, you know, have a governor and a legislature that's willing to stand up to the power of corporations, which wield tremendous influence, especially in California, where there are no limits on campaign contributions from corporations. Gray Davis, just to give you an example, got a $260,000 campaign contribution from one mortgage company in Long Beach. This is the kind of nonsense that goes on in California campaign finance. And, you know, people just shouldn't allow it to happen. It's true that corporations used to pay over 30% of the total tax load in the country, and now they pay something around 14 or 13%. And the way they've achieved that is by, you know, basically buying legislatures at both the state and the national level, and they write their own tax laws.
Thank you for the correction on my figure. I had it as 80, but I see
Yeah,
I miswrote it as 30.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's much
it's
lower.
30, not 80. Thank you for that. Also, I'd like to ask the candidate for lieutenant governor. Right now, the lieutenant governor post is kind of a sycophantic position. You just kind of schmooze with the guy who's in real power. Would you change that in any way? Would you be kind of a goad behind the governor to do the right thing, so to speak?
I'll be definitely much more active than what Gray Davis has been. You know, you never hear about what, you know, before his candidacy, you never heard about what he did. But Lieutenant Governor is the second highest job in California. When Lieutenant Governor talks, people listen. So I would get involved in a lot of different issues that are important to people of California instead of just hiding behind the governor.
One last question, then I'll get off the air, and thank you for letting me ask three. You had talked about universal health care. Would you feel that California should follow the way of Hawaii and do it on a unilateral basis for the state? And I'll hang up now. Thank you.
Thank you, caller.
I think that we should put the universal health care again on proposition. Last time that it was, I believe it was Proposition 186 that it was defeated. There was a lot of corporate money against this initiative. Now the doctors are even tired of these HMOs, tired of insurance companies making decisions for them. So I think we have a much better chance, and we should put it maybe next time on the initiative ballot.
We have another phone call.
Caller,
Yes.
you're on the air here at a joint production of Voices from the Village and Club Cruise. Do you have a question or statement for our guest tonight?
Yes, I do. Hi, Dan. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Don't take this personal, Sarah, but this needs to be said because growth is something that has to be dealt with, and particularly anyone that is dealing in ecology understands that growth cannot go on indefinitely. It has to be dealt with, and not just indirectly, and not just with lip service, but it has to be really, really taken seriously. The reasons for it have to be articulated passionately and concisely and logically. And if 80% of the growth in California is coming from immigration and the large families immigrants tend to have, we have to come to terms with that. And the idea of avoiding it because it's politically incorrect only discredits us. We have to come to terms with that. And this is not meant to denigrate anybody. It is ecological reality. And if we're going to call ourselves Greens, then let's not shy away from articulating ecological reality. Otherwise, let's call ourselves the humans or something else.
Well,
I respect both of you.
thank you. I don't know why you thought I would take it personally.
Good, I'm glad you don't.
No, I'm not taking it personally. I agree with you. We need to do something about the growth, but globally. You know, when I came to California in 1974, there was a book out, really good book, named Limits to Growth. And after 20 years, they wrote another book named Beyond the Limits. Right now, we are beyond the limits of growth. Growth means development, population growth, and everything. But we really have to think of it globally. Pollution doesn't stay in one state. It doesn't cut out at the border. It goes, when you have ozone hole, a size of the big as North America. So that's a big problem, and we need to deal with it. That's pollution. And these are the issues, that global issues that we have to think about. It's not just California. Immigrants are bringing a lot of good things to this country, to California, and they are contributing to the state economy. They are giving their taxes. They are, you know, the citizens of this country. And this country is based on immigration. So instead of really devaluing immigration, let's think about the population growth in terms of global population growth and help other countries to do that.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Go ahead.
I don't think that the Greens' motto is think globally and act locally. So I think it would be quite in accord with Green values to act locally in terms of growth. Now, we have 3% of the ancient redwoods left in this state. They're still being cut down. We've already lost 97% of them before we had 33 million people. How the hell are we going to save the other 3% when we have over 50 million people? I don't understand how that's going to happen, and that's the direction we're headed in a mere 2 more decades. I really don't think that copping out on immigration is going to serve ecological values. People that have high birth rates need to deal with high birth rates at the source, where they are. It's not good to export your problems to another country, and I am not excusing the United States for any kind of injustice that it's perpetrated elsewhere, and I'm fully aware, at least I sure think I'm fully aware, of the United States' complicity in the School of the Americas and so forth and so on. I'm aware of this, but we need to come to terms with growth, and we need to do it now, and I don't hear that happening from anybody. I would love to be able to vote for somebody that just comes out and says we've got to stop growth and we've got to get serious about it.
Thank you very much, caller, for your call. That sounded like a question about immigration.
Right. And you know what? If we think that way, we should stop really intervening in other countries. A lot of times when people come, immigrants come to this country, it's from the countries that have been really invaded by our policies here in the United States, like El Salvador, like Nicaragua, like Iran. You know what happened in Iran in 1953? There was a democratic government, and then CIA coup brought the Shah back, and what happened was that we had 30 years of dictatorship, that people couldn't even read books, or people couldn't express themselves, and that the only people who could talk to others were mullahs, the clergies in mosques. So people became very religious, and then after the Shah was out, then we got theocracy, which was horrible, you know, killed a lot of people in Iran. And that's why a lot of Iranians emigrated to California or to United States. So let's stop intervening in other countries, and let's, again, I agree with the caller, we need to do something about population growth, but we really need to think about it and start addressing it in a global way.
Thank you. I believe we have another call here. Caller?
Yes.
You're on the air?
Yes, hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
I'm concerned about the homeless population, not only in the world, in the United States, in California, but in Santa Cruz. The policies seem to be to drive them out of town, no matter which town it is. If every town has a policy to drive them out of town, every town has a policy that you can't panhandle, you can't sleep anywhere without getting a ticket. If every town has these policies, where can the homeless people go? And I believe the solution is much more than just shelters. It's also a human rights issue. I wonder if you could address that in terms of the Green Party platform.
Well, the Green Party platform is to eliminate hunger and homelessness in California. When I grew up as a kid in the 50s and 60s, nobody ever talked about homeless people. I don't even remember seeing homeless people. Now, maybe I was blind and they were all over and I just didn't see them. I remember you'd hear stories about, you know, hobo camp or something, you know, people riding the rails, but never do I remember seeing homeless people living out on streets the way they do all over the state and urban areas all over the country. So obviously there's something structurally going on which is causing this problem. And I think that under the emergency powers of the governor of California, that state resources can be brought into play in order to deal with this problem. And I agree with the caller that this is not simply about just sheltering people and, you know, herding them around like animals. This is about giving people a chance with their lives. And I think that's the responsibility of government, is to ensure human dignity.
Thank you for that answer.
Sorry.
I had asked a question earlier to Dan about his views on taxation. Sarah, what are your overall views on taxation from a general point of view?
Well, I agree with what Dan said, but also as a state employee, I see that, you know, people with paychecks pay much more taxes than people who don't have a paycheck. So we really have to shift taxes from paychecks to corporations. And also, with what, adding to what Dan said about campaign finance reform, well, you know, the state prison guards paid Pete Wilson about $600,000 in his campaign financing. So they got 12% raise in their salary and 3% in their retirement. That's what they got. But the state employees who protect our environment, who build our roads, and there are a lot of them out there, they got 0%. It's been 4 years that they have not received any raise in their salaries. And I think that we need to think about bringing fairness into California government. Right now, a lot of people are leaving state jobs because they cannot afford it anymore. And I think that we really need to attract good people to state of California. The state legislators and top officials got 26 to 34% raise. And one of the raises was for lieutenant governor. And if I get elected, immediately I would reject that raise unless the California state employees have a fair raise in their salary too.
Thank you for that answer. We have another call here. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Dan. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
I loved Sarah's last comment about rejecting the raise unless the California state employees get a raise. That's awesome. I like that a lot because I am a California state employee and I am someone who puts in money towards PERS retirement, which is something that Pete Wilson has always been trying to get his hands on. But that's not the question that I called to ask about. What I wanted to ask both of you is how you feel about gay and lesbian marriage and what would you do if that came across your desk, and not only marriage but benefits, etc. And I know that just recently Gray Davis spoke out about this, and he was against the marriage part, and he said, well, people deserve benefits, and gave some other sort of lip service to something like that, but was absolutely against marriage. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'm in favor of people loving each other, and I'm not trying to set myself up as the judge of how they should do that. So I support marriage between people, and I think people should be able to participate in the benefits, the tax benefits, the benefits in terms of how they're viewed by the larger society, the benefits just of being married. I've been married 27 years, and I highly recommend it. So I certainly don't think anyone should be denied that benefit. You know, I was at a high school in LA last week, and before I went on and did my talk with the students, all the students were asked to get up and do the Pledge of Allegiance. And those words have just been ringing in my head ever since, you know, with liberty and justice for all. It doesn't say that liberty and justice only for white men of property, or liberty and justice only for white men of property and women, or anything else. It says liberty and justice for all. So, you know, from my point of view, and maybe I'm a little bit simplistic, but I think that applies to every human being, and I think every human being is of equal value and should have equal rights and equal access to all the fruits of modern society. And, you know, it's that simple in my view.
Well, I think that nobody should be discriminated against based on their sexual orientation. I fully support that the partners should be able to use their benefits for each other, and I'm totally supporting the gay and lesbian marriages.
Thank you. I believe we have another call. Caller? Do we have another call?
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air here.
Hi. I have been doing some political activism in the Santa Cruz County area, and I think that a strategy that could work for saving what we all would hope would be a democracy would be to have the Greens and the Democrats and the Peace and Freedom and people to the left form an alliance. You know, there's a group called the Alliance for Democracy, and if we could all join together, then we could create a strength that would fight the oppression that we feel from the Republican Party and what's going on right now. I was wondering if you could, either one of you could respond to that.
I believe that the electoral system in this country doesn't really encourage alliance building or building coalitions. The system of winner take all, that means that, you know, don't build any coalitions. Like Greens in 6 countries are now in government. It's because of proportional representation and also because of coalition building. Just now in Germany, they built coalitions with social democrats. So it's really discouraged. But one of the purpose of us running in this campaign and getting out there and talking with people is really to get out there with different parties, with, you know, as Dan mentioned, Natural Law Party, Peace and Freedom, and really getting together. So this campaign will continue after the election, and we'll be talking to different progressive parties. The caller mentioned about Democratic Party, and I'll refer that to Dan. So she's saying building coalition with Democratic Party.
Well, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I was raised in a family where Adlai Stevenson was considered the closest thing to a statesman that you know, that my parents could imagine. I was a Democrat all through my adult life. I went to Congress as a Democrat. I have been to the belly of the beast. I have seen the way it works. And I don't have much confidence, frankly, with the Democrats being motivated to build coalitions with the Greens or with Peace and Freedom or Natural Law. In fact, our entire campaign for the last 6 months has been, you know, has convinced me, and I think it's convinced Sarah, that the Democrats are not in the least bit interested in being in a coalition with the Greens. They shut us out of debates. They refused to discuss issues with us. Before Sarah and I ran, we talked about electoral reform, and we talked to prominent Democrats about the need for that. They didn't even want to speak with us. When we bring up issues about trying to control corporations, the way I was talking about earlier, the Democrats have no interest in discussing that issue. They've taken the issue of universal health care out of their platform entirely. So I think the amount of common ground, I think if there's a coalition that should be formed, it should be a clear coalition between the Democrats and Republicans, because truly they are one party.
Okay, we have another call.
Caller?
Please check the number and dial again.
Okay. Did you want to
Then
ask a
I'll have,
question?
yeah, I have a question for Dan Hamburg. What is your stand on transportation issues? We know roads bring growth, but how do we get from here to there without building new roads, and how would you reconcile that?
Well, if I were governor, I would propose that we build no new roads in California that are going to be paid for by the state government. I would make efforts to maintain and, in fact, improve the condition of existing roads, because some of them are falling into very bad repair. I have lived in California for about 30 years, and I have witnessed the downgrading of public spaces, whether we're talking about libraries, whether we're talking about parks, whether you're talking about roadways, areas, median stripes. I mean, anywhere you go where it's a public space now, you're fairly likely to see a pretty dilapidated look out there. And I've been driving a lot this year, so I've seen a lot of roads, I've seen a lot of dilapidation. So I think we need to put the emphasis on maintaining and improving existing roadways. I think in terms of future transportation needs of the state, I think it's incumbent upon us to move to mass transit. And I know that's difficult. I know California's a huge state. I know Americans have a love affair with their automobiles, but we simply don't have enough space in the atmospheric sink to absorb the amount of greenhouse gases that our tailpipes are filling the atmosphere with. I mean, don't take it from Dan Hamburg. Take it from the living Nobel laureates who said in 1992 that humanity is on a collision course with the natural world. And one of the places that collision is most being felt is in the quality of our air. That's what global warming is all about. It's not about pollution. It's about carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrogen. And 60% of global warming is caused by fossil fuel burning, which is mostly done in vehicles. 60%. Another 17%, the next highest category, is from deforestation, from the destruction of our forests. Indeed, we have 20% of our old-growth forests left. And you know, a lot of people might think, well, if we cut all the trees, we'll just invent machines that'll turn carbon dioxide into oxygen. But won't that be, you know, a strange day? But that's sort of where we're heading. I mean, people seem so dissociated in this country from the natural world and the benefits that we get from trees, from wetlands. We've wiped out 95% of our coastal wetlands in the state of California. You know, people need to wake up and become aware that our natural environment is our greatest source of capital.
Thank you. We have another call here. Caller, you're on the air.
Well, hello, Dan.
Yes.
Yeah, what you just said pretty well adds up to my question. Did well about the streets. Maybe if the government got rid of a lot of their cars and the airplanes they're using, we could fix on the roads and the air, too. But I'm wondering, when you just said about the coastal wetlands, I've noticed the big thing the government's going about the ocean now, how they're going to fix up the ocean. What about a little bit inland about the creeks that go into the ocean, like Soquel Creek and many of the other natural creeks, where they're going along, and they've come up with this stuff called pitch canker disease, where UCSC will drop a mobile home somewhere or garbage that they don't want that has hantavirus on it. The trees all of a sudden in that area get pitch cankered. They've got to cut them down. And it causes erosion into all the creeks and fills the creeks up with silt. Their answer in the area of Santa Cruz has been to, whenever they have problems with the creeks, is to put more rocks in the creeks. Do you have any ideas, either Sarah or Dan, on how we can go about saving the creeks and riparian corridors of the California coastline?
Thank you, caller.
You know, it is possible in most instances to repair riparian areas. You can do it by planting the right kinds of trees. In some cases, you have to storm-proof creeks with rocks and other kinds of riprap. It's very laborious. It's very expensive, but we destroyed them. Now it's our job to rebuild them. Up where I live, up on the North Coast, our rivers have been so compromised. I think we've built something like 2,200 dams in the state of California, because the ethic in California until recently was that to conserve water was to keep it from going to the ocean. And of course that left anadromous fish without any habitat, because we've cut so close to streams that we've destroyed the canopies that protect the very eggs of the fish. We've destroyed riparian vegetation, which used to shade the stream beds. But you know, this is infrastructure. This is infrastructure every bit as much as roads and bridges and sewer system. And if we don't rebuild our natural infrastructure in the state, we're going to have hell to pay in the next coming decades. And in fact, we're already paying in lowered water quality, lowered air quality, more toxics, you know, all those kinds of things.
You know, I think that we have a lot of good environmental laws in California, but what we don't have is enforcement of those laws. Recently, there has been a lot of cuts in different departments, especially in environmental protection. And we don't have the enforcement team to go out there from Fish and Game and see, you know, that all these natural habitats, these creeks are being destroyed, or the water quality issues, all the dumping of waste oil or different chemicals into natural habitats. So we don't have the enforcement. What we do need is really, instead of, right now the agencies, the environmental protection agencies, the department under that agency, they need to make their own money in order to survive. We need to have a budget for these departments, and we don't have it. I work for the Department of Toxic Substances Control. They tell me every 6 minutes of my time needs to be recorded, and I have to, you know, right in front of the line what I did in those 6 minutes. And that's, you know, we have to, and these are all by corporations, by the industry, the big industrial companies, that they want us to record our time so that we don't get out there and research issues. Talk like, if I need a toxicologist for my team, I can only speak to that toxicologist maybe for 1 hour. If I charge it for 5 hours, the company is going to come back to me and say, you spend too much time on this. So instead of departments making their own monies, we should have general fund for these departments so that they can get out there and do their own work, what they're supposed to do.
Thank you. I believe we have another call. Caller?
Hello.
You're on the air here at a joint production of Voices from the Village and Club Cruise, talking with Dan Hamburg, candidate for governor, and Sara Amir, candidate for lieutenant governor of the state of California. Did you have a question or comment?
Yes, I do. Hello, Dan and Sarah.
Hi.
My name is Bruce Hobson. I'm with the East San Jose Gilroy Citizenship Project, and I think you guys are great. I have a question about immigration that's sort of brief, but I want to preface it with just a few facts and then ask for your answers and your opinions. California has the fastest growing Latino immigrant population in the country. The INS recently raised the fees for all immigration forms. Actually, that was on October 12th, a day which for many Mexican and other immigrant peoples from Latin America represents a 500-year history of pain and struggle. In this particular area where we live here, the average wait for immigrant people waiting to be called for their citizenship interview is 2 years and more. The INS, whose budget is determined by Congress, sits on thousands of applicants' filing fees, which will be more than doubled on January 15th of 1999. They tell people to just wait it out when they call them, or they just tell them, please don't call. Meanwhile, people waiting to be interviewed, in my opinion, who have a better sense of what citizenship truly means than many other folks, cannot vote. Both your views regarding immigration gives me a sense that you dramatically outshine the views of the so-called major candidates. As governor and lieutenant governor, what will you do to promote expanded citizenship, and how will you stand on issues such as growing anti-immigrant legislation and the social mood?
Thank you, caller.
Thank you.
Start.
You brought the issue home to me because I applied for my twin sister to become a resident of this country 8 years ago. And I haven't heard anything from INS. And, they sit on the application, they take their time, and they're not responding to anybody. So this organization, INS, is getting bigger and bigger and more bureaucratic, and the people who are permanent residents, or people who want to become permanent residents, who want to come here and work and contribute to this society, they cannot do that because INS is taking their time and they're not responding to any agency. And regarding permanent residents, there are a lot of people who stay in California maybe for 30 years, but they are still permanent residents. I think they should be able to vote on local issues because they are living in the state, but not maybe on the federal level, but on the local issues, they should be able to do that.
Yeah, I'm glad that the caller brought up the whole issue of the way Latino people have been treated, and certainly that same thing applies just as much to Native American people, indigenous people in this country. And I'm glad the caller referred to that as a 500-year struggle, because indeed it is. And I think our job in the next 500 years is to right a lot of the wrongs that were done through all those years and try to make the benefits that we've achieved, because there are some benefits. I mean, I think it's easy for us to think that, there's been all this Western civilization that's come in, and all this science, all this technology, all this industry, and none of it's any good. We should just dump it all and all go back to the cave and start rubbing sticks together again. That is not the green message. The green message is to take the best of what we have figured out, our tremendous ingenuity, creativity, ability, and distribute that in a way that people at least have a basic floor under them, so they don't have to worry that they're going to have to choose between taking their child to a physician and putting food on the table. Those are not fair decisions for people to have to make at the end of the 20th century. Now, specifically in terms of immigration, what happened was, one of the reasons for some of these delays is that the Congress has taken money away from exactly the services that process immigrants in the state, particularly the fingerprinting service. They made it so hard for people to get a fingerprint in the state that that in itself dramatically slows down. I mean, the whole thing is really set up to keep people from going through the process. I mean, it's obvious. The Republicans really don't want immigrants to vote because they think they vote Democratic. The Democrats don't really want immigrants to vote because it's so much fun to bash them. I mean, politicians of both stripes are getting off on, Prop 209, to some extent Prop 187, which the Democrats did a very weak job of combating. Prop 209, they just about fell over and supported it. I mean, for all their efforts to defeat it, they might as well have just supported the thing. Both parties seem to have an investment in immigrant bashing, and until we get past that and begin to deal with real issues instead of trying to put one group down in favor of another, we're not going to solve these problems.
We just have a few minutes left. In just a very brief time, could you say what you consider to be the biggest obstacle to the Green Party in getting people to understand your message?
Well, I would say the biggest obstacle is this antiquated electoral system because, I can't tell you how many times I've been told in the last 6 months, Dan, I agree with everything you say. I agree with everything Sarah says. The Green Party platform is great, but I can't vote for you because you're a spoiler. Well, what is spoiled is the electoral system. And one of the main reasons we're in this race, and people think of the Greens, we're in the environment, social justice, all those issues we've been talking about. But in fact, if there's one thing that has us in this race, it's the need for electoral reform. Because until we get more choices, until people can get out of the Democrat-Republican box and actually choose something different, then the democracy is on life support. And I feel like that's where we are right now. Sarah?
And I want to tell people, if you are tired of politics as usual, on November 3rd, when you go to the polls, vote your hopes, not your fears. Vote green.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Dan Hamburg, candidate for governor, state of California. Sara Amir, candidate for lieutenant governor, state of California, both members of the Green Party. And we want to thank Pacific Avenue Pizza for sponsoring a portion of this show. I'm Joe Grossman.
I'm Kathleen Haley.
Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again.